Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Heidi, you bought a rental property a couple years ago, and it doesn't sound like it was a really good experience. You had a lot of problems, and you weren't really making any money renting out the house, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So if I had given up, in the beginning when I first started, I had kind of a rough start getting into the investment game. So I just kind of stuck with it, and I've seen the fruits of my labor at this point, and I'm glad that I did. You're building equity through the time that you hold those properties. So I do think that time is very important and valuable in that sense.
Heidi had a really rough start to investing in rental properties. She wasn't making any money. She had some really bad tenants. She was basically renting the property out for the mortgage payment, which was $650 a month. So after everything, she was really losing money at first. Today, she's got the rent up to $2,700 a month, and her property is very easy to manage. So on the show today, we're going to kind of walk through her journey, see if we can figure out what she was doing wrong at first, and figure out how her property is so profitable today. Joining us on the show from Chattanooga, Tennessee is Heidi Rao. We'll take a really quick break. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Heidi. If you're looking for a quick and easy way to finance a rental property, reach out to Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She has a loan program where she only cares about your deal. She doesn't need to see your pay stubs, your bank statements, or your tax returns. The only thing she's going to look at is the deal. She wants to know, does the property cash flow? If it does, she'll give you a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. Now, the rates are going to be a little bit higher than a full doc loan, but it's still a great deal. She can close quickly, and there's no hassle. If you want to learn more, reach out to Chaley personally at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
Heidi, so the first property you bought, you didn't initially buy it as an investment. Your first property was a house that you bought to actually live in.
Correct. Yes. So I was a single mom at the time. I was working for one of the local hospitals, not making a lot of money. I think I qualified for like $65,000 at that point in time. So I found a house in North Chattanooga that was listed for $57,000. It needed some work, but it was all that I could really do at the time. And I had noticed that as far as that area was concerned, there was a pattern going on over there that just seemed like development would someday reach that area. It might be further in the future, but that, it would be a nice neighborhood and that sort of thing someday. So I had purchased that property initially as a place for us to live.
So your thinking was, we're going to buy this property and I'm going to live here. Like, you weren't thinking in terms of this would be a good rental one day?
Right. Yeah. I had no intentions of renting it at all. I had just intentions of moving into it and then just letting the value grow. Okay. And then eventually maybe selling it.
So you moved in and then things changed and you moved out. And you decided to turn it into a rental at that point?
Yes, I did. And the first renters that I had were friends of mine. They always say don't do business with friends, right. But I did. And they were a newlywed couple. They just needed a little bit of help. So I had agreed to let them stay there just basically to cover the note on the place. And that was it.
Okay. So did you know at that point to do any kind of screening or check their income? Or did you just assume, hey, these are friends of mine, they'll probably be fine?
Yeah, I didn't do any kind of screening. There was no application, obviously. We basically just had what you would call a gentleman's agreement. They didn't even have a lease. So they moved in. We had the agreement, and that was that.
So you get the mortgage paid for. You think, okay, this is going to work out. They're paying the mortgage. But then, obviously, it didn't work out. Where did things go wrong?
Well, they had kind of a big falling out, and they split up. And one of them stayed there for a short period of time after that, but could not pay the rent on their own. So I had somebody living in my house that I was still paying for, and
oh, no.
They basically promised, okay, well, I'm going to get out. I'm sorry. We don't have money to pay rent this month, and et cetera. all of that. So that's kind of where that
Did
ended.
they
And
did they end up leaving, or did that turn into an eviction?
no, they ended up leaving on their own. It just took a little bit of time. I think they were in there for about maybe a month or two after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did they do any damage to the property?
So the property wasn't in the greatest condition to begin with, but they did have some pets.
Hmm.
And so there was a little bit of just, the overall kind of thing you get with pets when somebody moves out. So there was a bunch of cleanup that I had to do. Since they left each other and their relationship ended kind of on a weird note. So there was some stuff that was left behind in the house, just while they were dealing with the whole like relationship ending, I guess. But I did have to do some clean out when they moved out.
All right. So the big takeaway from this experience, would you say, is don't rent to friends, or would you say really the big takeaway is like screen better, or like what could you have done differently to make that
I
a
would
better?
say definitely making sure you've got everything on paper, even if it's somebody that you know well and feel like you trust. Because people do have looser relationships with landlords when it's a friend, right? They assume they can't separate the friendship from like the business side, you know what I mean? So they kind of assume that if something goes wrong, it's fine and you're gonna be fine with them, and there's not gonna be any
Right.
hard feelings or anything like that.
So did you think about giving up, like after going through that experience? Did you think, maybe I should just sell the property, or did that cross your mind at all?
It did actually cross my mind about just going ahead and selling the property. Back then, it probably wouldn't have sold for much more than I bought it for at the time. So I had another opportunity with a new tenant that came along that had approached me. So I thought, well, okay, I wasn't trying to be a landlord, but I did have another tenant approach me about renting the property. So I said, okay, I'll give it a go, and rented the property out again.
How did that go?
So they notoriously became very late on paying their rent every single month. They usually ended up paying by the 30th of the month.
Oh,
I guess
wow.
in their head, it was not late as long as they got it, paid within that month.
Right, right.
So that was another learning curve, of course, dealing with that.
Yeah,
But I was at least getting a little bit more money. It was paying more than the note at that point.
right. So I guess at that point, like, you probably didn't know to like charge a late fee, or
Yeah, I mean, I kind of knew I could have. I just didn't do that
yeah,
because I knew them.
right. And yeah, once someone gets behind like that, it's just always found it's hard for tenants to get caught up when they get on that cycle of paying late. So what happened then? So did they eventually leave?
So I did eventually ask them to leave. So it was not really an eviction. Like there wasn't an official eviction, but there was kind of like a, hey, basically what I told them was, I think I'm going to have to move back into this house, which I did. So I'd asked them to go ahead and find a new place so that I can move back into the house.
Okay.
And they left, I mean, it took them once again, probably a month or two, but they did leave.
Okay. So they get out, you move back in the property, and then when did it become a rental again?
So I moved back into the property for several months. And after that, I decided I wanted to try the Airbnb stuff out because I'd heard a lot of talk about Airbnb. So I got on Craigslist at the time and started buying furniture and furnished the whole house. It wasn't a fancy Airbnb, obviously. But I just wanted to give it a try and see how things went. And then it also gave me the option to go there and stay periodically if I wanted to stay in town. Mm-hmm.
When you were doing Airbnb, how much were you making on average every month?
So on average, every month when I first did Airbnb, it was averaging about 1,600 to 1,800 a month.
Wow. So that's like almost, I guess, like an extra $1,000 a month that you were making. Now it sounds like from what you said that it didn't go very smooth. Was it a lot of hassle?
So Since the house was not in the best condition, I hadn't really done much to it yet. I did go in before I put it on Airbnb. I did go in, I replaced the carpets and I repainted and stuff like that. So just did some light cleanup in there because, pets and all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I put probably about $5,000 into it at that point in time to put it on Airbnb. But it was still a little bit older of a house. It still had its issues. And the city of Chattanooga at that point, when I first started, had no idea what an Airbnb even was. Okay. And then people started talking about Airbnbs more. The city of Chattanooga discovered what Airbnbs were. They started looking at what Nashville was doing with short-term rentals. And then we started running into some problems.
Oh, no. What happened?
Well, the city at first, they said that all property owners that were operating short-term rentals would have to rezone their properties to either R3 or R4, which also allows multifamilies. So that was the first initial thing that happened with the city was you're going to have to go through a rezoning process. That got shot down pretty quickly before it really affected me as a property owner because there were a lot of neighbors that were complaining saying we don't want R3 or R4 next to our R1 property. So the city council had to reconvene and decide what they were going to do next.
Now, with all this going on, did you think about giving up at any point? That, the city, it sounds like they, at that point, didn't want Airbnbs. Like, did you ever think, this is, fighting with City Hall is tough. Maybe I should just sell the property.
Yeah, once again, I did have that consideration. And then part of me was like, or I could rent it out again, but I really didn't want to deal with the long-term tenant situation. But the city fight didn't really become an issue until later. So I just continued to do the short-term rentals. And I said, I'll just do this until they tell me not to, basically.
Yeah. So then what happened? Did the city end up shutting you down at some point?
They did. I ended up getting a notice on my door one day, just out of nowhere, that basically said that I was operating an illegal Airbnb and that if I didn't stop, they would charge me $75 a day for all the days that I remained open. And that was after the second city council meeting where they kind of came up with more of a process on how to handle Airbnbs that they piggybacked off Nashville to kind of take their process.
Right. And what year was this?
Let's see. This was probably in maybe 2016.
Okay. So yeah, they were at that point still, I guess, trying to figure out how to do Airbnb. So, all right. So they shut you down. And then what did you do after that?
So after that, I went through the normal, well, do I sell this property or what do I do? But I ended up putting it back up as a long-term rental because at that point in time, I just thought to myself, okay, if I can get $1,200 a month here and I'm only paying a note of $450, then it's worth it to just have the passive income. So I went ahead and I put it back up on the long-term rental market and secured tenants at $1,200 a month.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, you're making a little bit less than Airbnb, but I mean, I would say it might even be a better deal having long-term tenants because it's a lot less work.
Yeah, and I was doing all the management myself when I had it on Airbnb. I was going in and doing all the cleaning, so there were some issues with my time just being taken for that too. And I figured once I looked at all the data, the tax data I had, and really analyzed my profit and loss statements, I figured, if I could get about $1,400 a month on a long-term tenant, I would be making about the same as what I was netting on Airbnb. I couldn't get $1,400, but I got 12, and I decided that was just fine.
Yeah. This is, I think, a home run deal at this point, that you paid $57,000 for the house. You're renting it at $1,200 a month. I mean, that's a really incredible return.
Yeah, I felt like it was awesome. I thought that it was doing great. The tenants seemed to be great. And everything was great just until they just kind of disappeared.
They left, you get the property back, you get everything fixed up. What did I get? So that brings us up to where you are today, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so talk to me about the property today and what you're doing with it.
So after I got it all renovated, after they had moved out, I decided, okay, well, you know what? I don't know if I want to deal with these long-term tenants again. What if I have another bad experience? This is 3 in a row that I've had bad experiences with. And I was really concerned about keeping the value of the property as great as possible. I just didn't want the property to be devalued anymore. So I decided that I would try to put it back on Airbnb again. But this time I understood the application process. I have a good relationship with the short-term rental district application guy for the city. And he basically told me, hey, Heidi, with the city, if you rent it for 30 days or more, then you don't have to fill out all this application stuff to have it certified through the city. So here's an idea. If you want to go ahead and do that while we're doing your application and getting you certified, you can rent it out for 30 days and we don't even mess with you on that.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So they have a problem with like someone coming for a weekend or something or a 2 or 3 day stay. But if someone's going to stay for 30 days or more, then that's totally fine with the city.
Yeah. And they just leave you alone. You don't even have to get the permits for a short-term rental if you do a 30-day minimum stay.
Awesome. So with a 30-day minimum stay, I assume that you can charge a lot more than you would for a regular long-term lease, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that Airbnb is set up, or similar sites, you can offer a discount if somebody books for at least 30 days. So I did a discount of about 40% off the nightly rate, which came out to, I think, $2,700 a month to me. And I just planned on doing that while I was waiting on getting my application done with the city. That was my initial plan, was to put it on there temporarily for 30 days. Once the city permitted me, then I would go back to the nightly rate stuff.
Wow, $2,700 a month. That is ridiculous on a $57,000 house. So now talk to me about the cash flow. So you got $2,700 a month coming in, and obviously you've got your mortgage and some other expenses, but I mean, are you profiting somewhere around $2,000 a month?
Yeah, easily about $2,000.
So then what are you doing with that cash flow?
I'm just putting it back into my investment business. I have another side of my business that I've started doing flips on. So that's been there kind of for that. And I'm just sitting here with these investment questions at this point of what to do with the properties that I have, right? Because I've got this property sitting there with so much equity in it. And while the immediate cash flow of the $2,000 a month is really cool, I just also have, I have the issue of thinking of, well, what could I do with all of that equity that's in there if I were to sell this property?
Yeah. So how much has the house appreciated?
It's worth about $250,000.
Wow. Okay. So you've got a $200,000 gain on that property. So, all right. So, but let's talk about this. Let's maybe talk about some of the options. So, I mean, you could always sell the house and get the profit, but the downside is the taxes. I mean, you're going to lose a lot of money to taxes. You could do a 1031 exchange. So you could sell the property and then take the proceeds and invest it into another property without paying any taxes, or a cash out refi. So you could refi and get money out of the property. Is there anything else that you're considering, or are those the three big options?
Those are really the 3 options I'm considering.
Yeah. So, so what are you leaning towards? Like, what are you thinking about right now?
So I'm a spreadsheet junkie, so I really have to get a good handle on the numbers to understand which each scenario would look like. Mm-hmm. With a cash out refinance, obviously that would be awesome to have that capital to use on another project, so long as this project is still profitable. Because I think, if I were to pull that money out and it causes this project to be unprofitable, then it doesn't make sense to really keep it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it still would be profitable. I mean, you've got such a huge spread there of $2,000 a month. If you took out $100,000 and bought something else, I mean, I think you would probably end up making even more money.
Yeah.
doing that. That's that's a great problem to have. So $200,000 equity and $2,000 a month in cash flow. That is really awesome. It's so you really got lucky that you didn't give up at any step of the way. That it really just shows how powerful time is with investing in rentals.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What a great ending. I love hearing stories like that. Heidi had a really tough time. She stuck with it and everything worked out perfectly. If anybody is interested in investing in Chattanooga, Tennessee, Heidi is a full-time agent. She works with a lot of investors and she would love to connect with you. I've got her contact information on the website. You can find it at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 366. I'd like to thank today's sponsor for making this episode possible. It's Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. Chaley is a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley personally, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you follow or subscribe to the show. We put out new interviews every single Tuesday. And if you're following the show, you will get notified as soon as the next episode comes out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.